Hey everybody, Bobby Medina here with my very good friend Paul Barron, and today we are bringing you a very special interview with a fantastic trumpet player who not only plays trumpet, but he has had a lot of success in many parts of the music industry. He's been a solo jazz artist for many, many years with 15 albums to his name, including several top 10 and 20 Billboard charting releases. He's played on over 300 albums with artists ranging from Freddie Hubbard to Paul McCartney, as well as performing on TV and film soundtracks. He's toured nationally in the world as a headliner and as a music director. And as a composer and producer, he's written a ton of music and produced recordings in multiple genres for many different artists. And most recently, some of the artists and some of his original compositions have been recorded by artists like Dick Van Dyke and actress Jane Lynch, whose recording of his song, A Swingin Little Christmas, which I have, made it to the top 10 on Billboard's adult pop charts. He's led his own band since the 80s, ever since I've known him, and currently also leads his own big band, doing many of his own arrangements and compositions. He has been a Yamaha artist since 1990. He's authored a couple of music-related books and multiple articles for music trade magazines. He has one of the largest private Louis Armstrong memorabilia collections around. He works as a studio engineer, has his own studio, runs his own record label, and has founded and ran a child trafficking nonprofit. And in addition to that, he owns and runs a mid-century modern vintage shop as just a side hobby. So welcome, Tony Guerrero. I'm tired just reading your bio here.
Suddenly I realize I don't have time to be sitting here.
Yeah. Well, we'll get this party started, and I'll let Paul throw out the first question.
Sure. Well, I'm glad I topped up my coffee, because that was quite the introduction there. So Tony, we know a lot about your trumpet playing, but also I know that you've always been involved in the recording industry from behind the scenes and behind the mic, but also as a producer, arranger, all the rest of it. Can you tell me or tell us more about that side of things? In particular with COVID, so many of us are shut down and doing small, home studio recordings. Can you tell us about your time with that?
Well, honestly, since I was a kid and started to get into music, I always had a sense that I wanted to explore all the areas of music. I started writing when I was, kind of early on, and I always wanted to lead my own band. My first trumpet hero was Chuck Mangione, and I would stare at the picture of the Hollywood Bowl concert with him in the middle of thousands of people, and then the orchestra around him. I just thought, that's the guy I want to be, and so I just kind of started pursuing all these little avenues. And by the time I met Bobby in college, which was when we met, I already had my mind around, like, how do I start writing for orchestra or for big band and like get them all together. And Bobby, I don't know if you were there still, but we would do concerts there where our jazz band, I would invite the orchestra and the choirs to come sing with us, and just tried to do these big, gigantic things. And then as I started doing, getting out in the professional world and leading my own band, all the writing, like, it just sort of progressed where I just wanted to be putting stuff out there. So I started learning about the studio, and every chance I got to put away $20 or whatever, I would just start saving money so I could go into a studio and just invite some friends with no real plan. And I have a bunch of horrible audio cassettes of us just playing in the studio with no direction, and but just learning the craft and learning to understand it all. And in fact, I remember even in high school, when I was a freshman, I had a 4-track machine that my dad had that was just an old reel-to-reel, and I thought I invented overdubbing. Like, I realized, oh my gosh, if I record here, then I can record on that track. And I thought I was revolutionizing the music world, but it just always fascinated me. So I just kept learning and exploring, and I I love learning new tricks. Even within the last several years, I went back to school to study some orchestration classes, and it's just always fascinated me to do more than just a single focus. I guess I get a little bored if I do too much of one thing. So if I'm in the studio all the time, I miss the live playing. If I'm playing live all the time, I miss the studio. If I'm not writing, I'm missing that. So I just have a need to be creative and doing something new all the time. So
Yeah, I feel a little bit like that as well. We're playing, and in my case, writing, and sometimes promoting, and those kinds of things. And I don't like to do too much of the same thing all the time as well. So, well, you're in your studio right there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do there, what kind of projects you work on, and tell us a little bit about your setup.
well, I've when we bought this house, there was a bonus room, and so we converted the bonus room into a studio for me. So it's a couple of rooms. There's a good sized vocal booth. I can fit about 5 people in there, and then my little space here is comfortable for me. Um, I don't do a lot of like I can't really record drums here, so I couldn't do a lot of records completely top to bottom here. But I do a lot of projects here that range from indie projects to a lot of stuff for TV and production music. I have I'm pretty deep in all the virtual instruments, so if I need to create something all by myself, I can do that. I just did a track for is it America's Got Talent or something like that that I had to do the whole thing. So I just spend a lot of time in this little room. Again, learning new things all the time, and as the technology progresses, you just have to keep fresh on it. And but then I'm set up here. I've got my horn mic right here, so anytime I get a track I'm supposed to play horn on, it's easy to just jump into that. And um, yeah, like that. I do all my writing here. I've got a piano downstairs too, but I do a lot of writing, and which writing is really one of my favorite things to do, and it's also can be one of the least gratifying because um, it's just so hard to get music out there and heard. And I know that when I die, they will find far more songs in my folders than they'll ever find on iTunes.
Do you have a particular genre that you prefer to write for? And do you have a particular size of group of instrumentalists and or vocalists that you like to write for?
I don't have a group size that I prefer necessarily, but I guess I do gravitate towards a small ensemble. My bands have always been 5 or 6 piece bands, um, and so I lean towards that. But it's I don't know that it's because I love that more than the other. But as far as the type of music I like writing, I do go through phases. Like the last couple of years, I've been writing a ton of music that again has barely has any market value at all, but it's uh, sort of that 1950s 1960s cocktail jazz kind of vibe, and a lot of tunes with vocals and lyrics that sort of fit in that genre. And maybe I could have been working back in those days writing that kind of music, but so I've got a little jazz circle of people here, and we get together and record songs, and we perform them in the clubs. But other than occasionally landing something on a TV show or something, there's again, there's not a big market for that. But I've just found myself gravitating towards that particular style lately. The last couple of things I wrote were very specifically leaning towards that Sinatra in his 60s, when he was more melancholy and gravelly voiced, and thinking about deeper things and reflecting on his life. And I just find myself writing like that. And again, I'm not sure what I'll do with most of these, but I will say one of the things I love is I love getting a call and needing something written very specific. One of the things I'm proudest of is I got a call from an agent for ESPN, and they said, Tony, I was walking through the supermarket, and they said, hey, we need to have a Frank Sinatra style love song about tennis. Do you have anything like that? And I said, of course I do. Let me get home. Because we've all got love songs about tennis from the Sinatra era. So I went home and I wrote something, like I just love the rush of can I make this happen? And so I wrote a tune and I started calling around. Long story short, I turned in 12 hours later, I turned in a full big band recording of this song for this tennis show. I don't even know what it was for necessarily. Um, so I do love that, like being challenged with something like that, just to see if I can do it and come through,
That's cool. That's really cool.
regardless of the style, really.
So I just saw a picture a little bit ago of Louis Armstrong back there, and I know he's probably one of all of our idols here. But tell everybody a little bit about. I'm kind of curious. I've seen some of the stuff you have in your Louis Armstrong collection, but tell us a little bit about what it consists of, because it's pretty interesting.
So back in I want to say maybe 91 or something, somebody, a painter gave me a painting of Louis Armstrong and I loved it. Like it's still hanging in my studio right over there. And when my manager saw that, she said, "Oh, I've got this little statue that my dad used to have in his bar." And she brought me this Louis Armstrong statue. So suddenly I had this little shrine going to him. And then little by little, I just started finding, and this was really before eBay and all of that, but I just started finding ways to collect his little memorabilia pieces from him. And of course, once the internet became the internet, it got a lot easier. And so my collection just kept growing and growing. So I have a lot of, I try to limit it to things that are actually from his career in some way. So I don't necessarily need, a coffee mug with his face on it now, but stuff that was really like concert programs and signed albums and things like that. So a couple of my favorite things are, I do have a handkerchief of his from a concert that he signed. And unfortunately, by the time I got it, the signature was pretty faded and it's faded even more. So I try to keep it.
Oh, wow.
So I think at some point you won't be able to see that signature anymore, but I love that I own it.
That is cool.
I have, he was famous for his love of Swiss Chris, the laxative.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I have a little signed Swiss Chris box from him, which is kind of rare. Was it 2000? We were doing a 100th year birthday thing for him at a jazz club nearby, and I had an in to contact Danny Barcelona, who is his drummer from 1959 up until he died, and I contacted him and he came to that show, and two things happened. One, he hadn't played drums in 20 years by that point, but he got up and played Hello Dolly with us, which was, he was on the original album. And it was just, as you can imagine, very thrilling to play that with him. But he also gave me, there's a famous picture of Louis Armstrong sitting on the toilet that he sent out as a Christmas card to all of his friends because of the Swiss Chris thing. And he gave me an original 8x10 from that photo shoot of a slightly different pose. So that's one of my favorite things. And he also gave me a letter Louis wrote him, and, just a lot of different things like that. You can, if you're interested, you can go to my website, and I think pretty much the whole catalog of stuff is up on there, and you can kind of scroll.
Cool. We'll make sure we post that up underneath here when this comes out. That's great. One of the coolest things I think is you got a chance to play one of his horns, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. So if you ever get to New York, you have to go to Queens and go tour the Louis Armstrong House and Museum. It really is one of the most moving exhibitions or exhibits you can imagine. And in fact, I've encouraged people who know very little about Armstrong and aren't necessarily jazz fans or trumpet fans, and they're emotionally moved by the way they do this tour. It's just so fascinating, his story and this humble little house that this worldwide famous millionaire lived in. And he used to record himself on reel to reel, just conversations with friends and all of that. And so as you walk through the house, there's recordings of him playing, like as he was sitting in that chair talking to his friend or his wife or whatever. It's just so moving. But the guy, one of the main curators, or the curator of the Louis Armstrong archives at Queens College, is a guy named Ricky Riccardi, who is just by far the greatest Louis Armstrong expert. He's a young guy, but he invited me to the archives, and I got to play on. He brought out 3 of Louis' horns, and I got to play on those, and it was just what an experience. There's video of me and you can hear me shaking as I play. Like, there was no getting around that. And then there's a theater owner here in LA who owns one of his trumpets, and he lets me play it on shows occasionally too. So.
Wow, very cool. Well, when you come up to Seattle, we have the chance to get together every now and then when time permits. You usually have a really busy schedule. And one of the last times I saw you, you were working with Jane Lynch in her relatively new show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that and what your role is in that project?
Yeah, that by far one of the most fun gigs I've ever had. And it's been going on we started that October of 2014 was our first date we did. And we've been touring all over the country since then, minus COVID, of course. So, she did that show Glee. And my friend Tim Davis was the vocal contractor for all the music that was recorded for that show. And he got to know Jane and a lot of the other cast pretty well. And so when she started having the idea to do this little show, like a little cabaret thing, she asked Tim about anybody who could. It was supposed to be for one show in San Diego. Like, did he have a music director for her? And so he recommended me. And like I said, it was supposed to be one show. It was supposed to be just I play piano, so I was just going to play piano for her with a bass player and drummer from my band. And as they started sending me the music, I just realized, well, it'd be great if we had woodwinds on this, because so many of these tunes need those little clarinet lines or whatever. So they had me bring my sax player, and then they asked, could we do a couple of opening tunes, because there wasn't really any. There wasn't enough material for a whole night yet. And I said, well, I don't know that I really can. Like, they asked, like, could we perform something, because they knew that I had my own band. I said, well, I'm not on piano with my own band, so if we bring my piano player, we can. I can do an opening set with my band, and then he can play strings and pads or whatever behind us, for the rest of the show. So we did one rehearsal with the quintet. She loved it. And basically she let us know right away, we're going to do a lot of this. This is great. So it's Jane with Kate Flannery, who is Meredith from The Office, who is just such a dear, sweet. They're both so great. I can't even rave enough about them. And my friend Tim. So the three of them and my quintet. And Jane has always, from the beginning, treated my band as equals in terms of, like every talk show she's on, she mentions us by name. She, like gives us full credit for all the stuff. And it's just, we're not her backup band. Like, we're part of her family in that way. And it's just so gratifying. And then, in 2016, we were on tour. And we just started talking about, we all love this era of the late 50s, early 60s. And we just said, we should do a Christmas album like that. And so we decided to do it. And that album turned out to be a really good hit for us. And we've been touring that around. And I have 5 originals on it, and then did all the arrangements for everything else. And it's just one of the greatest life experiences for me is working with her in that whole project.
That is so cool. The album's great. It's a lot of fun. I know we played it during the holidays. We pull it out every year. So that's super cool. And now through Jane, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, you got involved somehow with Dick Van Dyke too, right? Because you're working with him from time to time.
That came from the bass player who used to play in my band mostly in the 90s called me, and we've always been friends and do gigs together still, but he called and was actually doing the arrangements for an album for Dick, and asked if I would play trumpet on it. And naturally I said yes. And then it progressed to him saying, hey, there's a tune that it might be fun to have you do a duet with him on, because I do a really bad, I guess, impression of Louis Armstrong. And
I wouldn't say that.
And my friend Dave knows that I do that. And I said, I told him, listen, I've been asked that before, and I always say no, because I don't want people to think that I take that impression very seriously, or that I even think it's that good. But there's no way I'm saying no to Dick Van Dyke. So I got to sing a duet with him on his record. And from that, I approached him. I had written another song, another Christmas song for a big band. And it was just the perfect type of song for him. and we asked if he would do it, and so we recorded him singing that with Jane Lynch together, and we got to shoot a video for that, which you can find on YouTube if you just search for Dick Van Dyke and Jane Lynch, you'll see that. And it just, again, so great to be around somebody that iconic. It's a little otherworldly actually, because he's just somebody that's such a part of our lives that he kind of doesn't seem real, even though I've been around him a lot now. And I still have, like, every voicemail he's ever left me is saved. Hey, Tony, it's Dick. Let's get together and just play some tunes. And, I'm constantly jaw dropped at that kind of stuff.
That is cool. I mean, he's been a part of our lives since we were kids, since our parents were even young. I remember just being a little tiny tyke and seeing him, on the different shows.
He's exactly what you want him to be. Like, he is just as smiling and friendly and quick to share a story and constantly dancing and laughing. He's exactly what you want him to be.
Well, I've seen some videos where people meet him in a restaurant and talk, and he seems to be the nicest guy. He's not one of these, hey, get away from me, leave me alone, or whatever. So that is cool.
Yeah. So that's been great.
Well, one of the things we've been asking everybody here, with this COVID that's been going on, we know that, we're not gigging like we once were. But how are you? What kind of practice regimen do you have going on, if any?
Probably the most embarrassing question you can ask me right now. So I've been fortunate in that the last 6 months of 2020, the studio work started to pick up for me. So I like everybody, I lost all the touring, all the live gigs, and the studio work stopped for a while, and it started coming back. So I was able to work a lot here. And when you're doing all this stuff, the horn's not on your face a lot. But I was also fortunate in that there's a jazz club out here that when COVID hit, they were very quick to think ahead, and they set up an outdoor stage and sound and lighting and the whole thing. And so the last half of last year, I was able to do some live gigs, once or twice a month outdoors. And just very fortunate that I had that. But I will say it's as it's a challenge to stay up on the horn. And even I don't know how guys do it, because for me, I can play for 5 hours a day. Not that I do, but if I played 5 hours a day at home for 2 weeks straight, if I get on a gig after, it's just not the same. 2-3 songs in, I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. So honestly, I haven't found a way to turn my home practice into adequate preparation for a gig when I've been off a gig for so long. There's just such a different energy playing with a drummer, and as like just playing with the whole live thing, that it's tiring a lot quicker than playing at home. So I think it's smart to just leave your horns out. I keep one by the TV, because if I'm going to sit down and play, it's got a practice minute, I should at least be buzzing and doing something. And but yeah, I just had my first gig last Thursday, my first live gig since December 3rd. And, 2 weeks of just trying to be on the horn. And I got on there and I was like, I had a decent night, but as I listened to the recording later, like, I was playing it so safe. I just knew I was not about to try anything,
We recently spoke with a tremendous jazz player from Argentina, who's a good friend of mine, and I actually met him in Sweden. Gustavo Bergali is his name, and we were asking him this question as well about practicing, and he actually programs a few different sets, and he plays along with like some tracks or whatever. And he says, I just do, like, I think he said 3 sets a day or something like that. Yeah. Right, Paul?
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. That's part of what I've been doing too, is, just play alongs and just trying to play 3 or 4 tunes at a time and just, get through them. And it definitely helps for sure. I mean, you can't just not touch the horn and get on a gig, but yeah. I haven't found that perfect bridge from just playing at home for weeks and weeks to getting on a gig. I haven't found that yet.
No, I think we all agree there is no bridge. I mean, it's a completely different monster once you get there.
Yeah.
Well, somebody said, and this is very true, that once this COVID is over, we're all comeback players. So I guess that's the good news is that we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're up here. Well, actually, right, but we both live up here in Washington, Paul and I. And I've talked to a number of people over the years, and I'm curious a little bit as to how if things have changed at all. But I know earlier on, maybe in the last couple of years, the laws regarding entertainment and taxes and all this stuff have been really kind of wacky down there in California. Can you just kind of give us an overview about what's been going on? Because I know you've been involved a little bit politically down there as well.
Yeah, I met with like the main state senator who sponsored the bill that wiped us all out. 2020 was just a banner year for musicians in California. So when January 1st of last year hit, a law was enacted called AB 5, which was primarily aimed at Lyft and Uber drivers, and it was the law's attempt to have them treated as employees. Like basically, it was a very union-based law, like trying to get all these drivers unionized and have these companies, which were designed to be freelance companies, have them start treating their drivers like employees instead of freelancers. Well, the law was passed, and it just basically blanketed the term freelancers. So any freelance profession in California was now affected by this law, which includes musicians, actors, photographers, painters, babysitters, like everything that can be freelance was affected. A few industries were exempted because they had huge lobbying groups that could afford to get exempted early on. But for us, what it meant was, here's just a really good example. I could no longer just hire my bass player and call him and say, hey, we got a $75 gig for an hour tomorrow, whatever it is. Even though we've been working together 10, 20 years, I can no longer do that. I have to make him a W-2 employee of my actual business. So I have to then file an LLC or some kind of official entity for my business. I have to pay him, even if I use this musician one time the whole year and it's a cheap little $100 gig, he has to be a W-2 employee of my business. And I have to pay him through a payroll company. I have to pay for his disability, his state, taxes, all of, just like any other W-2 employee of any other business. As you can imagine, that's an impossibility for the way we work and what we do. And it was very clear right away that they had no idea how freelancing worked and how it works great for many of us and how we chose this lifestyle and prefer it this way. And so there was a pretty long battle fought. Finally, I'll make it short, but finally by the end of the year, there were some exemptions for musicians. They didn't cover everything, but it fixed some of the basic issues. I was somebody who, and actually, to be honest, I'm one of the only people I know of that tried this. But when January hit, I thought, all right, that's a law. I'm going to get all my ducks in a row. And I set up my entity and I hired a payroll company. And I did a jazz club gig, which, as you know, jazz clubs barely pay already. I paid all the guys through a payroll company. By the time all the taxes and everything and my payroll company fees were paid, I made negative $2 on the gig. So you can see that can't be carried over into a career. So we fought it. We got some exemptions. The big thing everybody needs to be aware of, and there's still stuff we need to fix in California, but the thing to be aware of is that look for the term the PRO Act, because that's a national version of that is being, so I know Biden supports it and I know a lot of others support it. And it's really it's a union driven law. For us in California, the musicians union represents, I think it's something like less than 3% of working musicians in California. And as you know, it's great for the guys who are doing movie soundtracks all the time and that kind of work. But for most of the musicians in California, the musicians union isn't a good fit. They were the ones at the table speaking into this law. And so they were the ones that decided how we could be handled. And that was the big problem, is that actual freelancers were not part of the conversation. That's happening on a national level now too. And so it's something that we didn't know to fight it early. Hopefully nationally we can get the word out that that needs to be fought or altered before it turns into the same issue nationally.
What a mess. Wow.
Oh yeah. And then of course we all lost our work anyway. So
that was the upside.
That was the upside. The upside is I didn't have to deal with payroll anymore.
Oh man.
We did find, I will say this, we did find a workaround that we are hoping will benefit us when we all do our taxes, but the venues that were willing, we would have them write individual checks to the musicians. The issue was, if I hire somebody to help me do the job that I'm hired to do, like perform music, and I need somebody in that role, a bass player, a drummer, then they have to be my employee. If a restaurant whose primary business is food hires a musician, that's not the same thing. So the issue wasn't that I couldn't be hired, let's say as a soloist, by a restaurant. It was that I couldn't then hire my musicians. So we started having the venues pay all the musicians individually. So that way it wasn't having to go through me as
right.
It was the club hiring 5 different freelancers.
Right. Although you had to do all the extra work.
Right.
Is it still W-2 work then if the restaurant is paying?
No, then it's 1099 again. Yeah, and the fact is, it was also confusing. Like, I sat with the assembly person who wrote this law, and she could not answer some of the most basic questions about how it should be organized or how to do it. And it was like that all across the board. So they really did pass the law without understanding it themselves. So
yeah, that's crazy. That's kind of the way the way our nation's been going here.
Wait, bureaucracy that hasn't thought things through?
Yeah. Right.
Tell me that's not true.
Well, let's switch gears here. You know, we've known each other for many years, since college. We've played a number of gigs. We've done some fun things together. And
stop just right there, because since you brought up college, I wanted to show you something that I have, because I am kind of a memorabilia collector, as you know, not just the Armstrong thing. I have some like Art Tatum stuff, Duke Ellington stuff, but I also have some Bobby Medina stuff.
Oh.
All right.
I love it. I love it.
Bobby Medina's Polka album from the early 80s.
Yeah. It wasn't my album, technically. It was a polka band that I played in.
And to this day, it's the only costumed gig I've ever done, just so you know.
Not me, unfortunately. But, you know, we got to do what we got to do. But where I was going to go is you've managed to play with a lot of people, a lot of artists from different, like we were saying, different genres of music. But let's talk a little bit about the pop world. What's it like playing trumpet in the pop world? And tell us a little bit about some of the some of the pop recordings or gigs you've done.
You know, usually when you're in a pop setting, you're going to be part of a horn section thing. It's pretty rare that they need a trumpet soloist or something like that. And then there's always pop artists who are trying to do some little jazz crossover. So a lot of it has been a kind of a mixed bag. I don't really consider myself a big horn section guy. Like, there are 300 guys I would hire before me for certain types of things, you know. But I've been able to do some of that. You know, most recently you mentioned Paul McCartney. I got to play on his couple albums ago, and but in that setting, you know, I wasn't really in a pop setting. I mean, it was a pop album, but it was sort of a small orchestra for this one tune. So I was one of 3 trumpets, and the day I was there, it was all woodwinds and brass. And you know, so it wasn't quite. It wasn't like playing in a Bruno Mars kind of setup.
Mm-hmm. Where did you guys record that at?
That was at it's now Henson, but it's the old A&M studios.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And he was just the sweetest man, and came over. You know, he's a trumpet, he played trumpet, and so he came over and picked up you know, Kai Palmer was on it. And he put Kai's trumpet, and he played When the Saints Go Marching In, and you know, we instantly put Kai's trumpet on eBay. And, yeah, just a really great experience. And
like in the pop world, you've done some stuff with like the Jonas Brothers, right?
Yeah,
And
I played on some horn section stuff, which we recorded here in my room. The some friends of mine were, especially in the most of the 2000s, were doing a ton of Disney writing for like Hannah Montana and all those shows.
Mhm.
So I played piano on the High School Musical shows and movies, and then we did some horn stuff here for the Jonas Brothers. And so much of that stuff. One of the bummers is that those big Disney projects rarely credit the musicians. So even having the albums, like your name doesn't always appear in there, and so you have to wait until you get something from the union to have any kind of proof you did it. Um, a couple years ago, I got to do the Grammys with Chance the Rapper, who, to his credit, Chance has a trumpet player in his band. He's just got a small group, and it's all kind of hip hop musicians, but he's got a trumpet player that travels with him too. But I got to contract an orchestra for him for the Grammy broadcast a couple years ago. Again, so it was a pop artist, but utilizing a more a bigger like orchestral or jazz kind of ensemble, and that's usually where I find my way into those kind of gigs.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask about your home recording setup because both Bobby and I are starting to do some of this as well, and all that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your microphones and your mic interface, and what DAW you're using and so on.
Yeah, I record on Pro Tools. I have Logic and can use it if I need to, but I've been a Pro Tool guy for so long that I just stick to what I know. Um, my favorite mic over the years was always the Royer 121, and then I was convinced to buy this other mic that I did one session on, and he said I'll get you a great deal, da, 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 the whole thing. And I sold my Royer, bought that, and I really liked it, but over time I didn't love it as much. So I spent a couple years not very happy with my mic, and then I stumbled on a mic that I've been using the last 3 years or so by a company called Slate. And Slate, and I told Bobby all about this, but Slate does a virtual mic system where they've designed this setup where when you buy it, you get the mic and a preamp and the software. And it's essentially, because it's all proprietary, they're able to analyze through the software, analyze that waveform and turn it into the same sound as 100 other microphones. And so I'm able to recreate a Royer 121 using this mic that cost a lot less. And not only that, I can use it for vocalists, and I can have the a U47, I can have the 251, like all these classic vocal mics. So I've been loving that system. It's really, for me, one of the best things that you can have for a home studio because it really is versatile. You can use that system on tons of different instruments. It's actually two different mics. They have two different mics. There's the big capsule, which like you would use on a vocalist. And then I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but here, I'll unplug it. This one, which I use for the horn, and it basically through the software converts into the 121. So this is what I've been using the last few years, and I love it. And I'll say that every session I've turned in, I've never had an engineer complain about the sound or question anything. Now, all that to say, just this week I bought a mic, and Bobby, this is the one I told you about.
And I think this might be the one Paul's been talking about as well.
Yeah, so this one's by a
Oh
company
yeah.
called Sterling, and it's a ribbon mic, and I was shocked at how cheap it was, and I had enough players saying it sounds good that I thought, well, for that price, it was like $160 or something. For that price, how wrong could I go? I'll just try it out. And it's a fantastic mic. I used it actually on a live gig the other night, and when I came home, they record it um, multi-track. So when I came home and I started playing with mixing it, it's a gorgeous mic. I can't figure out why it's so inexpensive, but uh, I can already tell you I would recommend that financially over the Slate. The Slate system is going to run you about $1,000, and it's worth 1,000 for sure. It's worth more than that. But to just get a mic in for your horn right now, I'm really impressed with this Sterling mic. It's fantastic.
I'm glad to hear you say mine shows up tomorrow.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'd love to know
Yeah.
what you think too, but I haven't really used it on a session yet because I've only had it for about 4 days. I haven't needed to yet, but I sure loved it live.
Yeah, I saw Michael Stevers' post, and I just thought, well, he's digging it, and
But actually, it was Michael's. I had just talked to somebody about the mic the day before, and then I saw Michael's. I'm like, okay, that's a sign. I have to buy something.
Yeah. And then on that same thread, Rob Scher chimed in and said, okay, well, mine's coming in tomorrow. And Alan Kaplan said, well, for that price, I'd be crazy not to. So,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's you can't beat the price, and I mean it's a good solid mic. I mean the construction feels great, so I'd like to. I mean maybe they're all stolen parts or something. I don't know.
yeah, that was my only question is how long is it going to hold up, for that kind of price? How long could it possibly last?
Yeah. Well,
But on the other hand, for that kind of price,
keep buying them.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you just to quickly go back to your Slate modeling microphone. So have you, I know they've A-B'd these things within the company and that there's samples of it up that you can hear and stuff, but have you ever just A-B'd them yourself
No,
just
I
to
mean
try them?
not really, because I would have to I'd have to sit there with a U47 or whatever other mic, and I just haven't done that. The truth is, and this is maybe part of my own naivete here, but I ultimately think that for most projects we're doing that we're sending out from home, most of these mics are, if you can get a good sound almost out of any good quality mic. And so there are always going to be reasons to use one mic over the other, but even if it didn't sound exactly like the 121, I'm really happy with the sound of it. And in fact, there are many times where I'm so happy with the sound, I don't bother with the software. Like the mic itself captures the horn really well. So
yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yeah, exactly. And then half the time you send your file out and it gets all squashed and stuck in the back anyway. So it's like,
that's the thing. Like, I mean, probably half the projects that I hear the final mix back, I think I could have recorded that on my iPhone and sent it.
very well might have.
Right. So,
Well, very cool, man. You have done so many things, and it's been, so fun to watch your career progress, and it's been so fun just to be able to hang and get a chance to see you from time to time.
you were a big part of that early time for me too, because I know being in college, I ended up at Cal State Fullerton kind of by accident. Like I didn't really have a game plan and I didn't know what kind of music school it was, but I was not a good fit there. And it was, most of the guys were kind of classical and a little bit more serious.
Mm.
Here's the thing about me, and this maybe isn't great to admit to a room full of trumpet players, but I've never been able to look at myself as just a trumpet player, like in that I'll never be one of the greats on the horn. I've always wanted to be a composer, producer. The trumpet is my main voice, and I love finding my voice on that instrument. But it was never about being the best trumpet player in the world for me. And so I didn't always fit in with a lot of trumpet players who wanted to be the lead guy and wanted to be the biggest, loudest, or whatever it was. That was just never me. Like early on, I was way more about Chuck and Chet than I was about Maynard, and so you were the one guy in college that like kind of saw me and saw what I was about and kind of took me in, and I've always appreciated that about you. So.
Well, I've always viewed, I mean, to me, there are trumpet players, but then there are musicians,
Right.
and I like to be classified personally, and I like to hang around musicians, because it's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. I mean, yeah, granted, this is a tough instrument to play, and you do have to have a foothold on it, but you also have to express yourself in a way that you see fit, and it's like I kind of feel a little bit, I can play up there, I can do a few things, but ultimately for me it's not that, it's about expressing myself and playing kind of along the lines of what I hear in my head,
Right.
you
Right.
know. And everybody's different. Like Paul's brilliant, man, when he comes to playing lead and playing shows and just being like super duper accurate. But again, he's a musician. He's just not.
What's
He's
that,
not
Tony?
just.
I said I have no idea what that's like to be able to play super accurate.
Well, Paul sure does. If you ever get a chance to play next to him, you'll hear what it's like, and it's always a joy when I get to sit next to him and hang out with him too. But we're all different. And at the end of the day, I think the highest compliment any of us can be paid is to just be put in the category of musician and not just trumpet player.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
So, Tony, one of the questions I always love to ask is, do you have one particular memorable gig or musical situation that you've been in that will always stick with you in your heart? And two, the second part is, do you have one artist or musical situation that you haven't played in yet that you really want to?
Yeah. If I had more time to think through it, my answer might be different. But the first gig that comes to mind that was just that memorable to me was I got to do. It was sort of at the height of my contemporary jazz life, and I had a new album out that was doing really, really well, and we got invited. This was in 1991. I got invited to the Cancun Jazz Festival, and I got to headline the main festival with, or be one of the headliners. I wasn't like the last act on, but with some of my heroes like Nancy Wilson. Wynton was on the night before, and like Joe Sample was on that bill, and I just remember being on that stage, and I can't remember the number. I want to say it was like 15,000 people in the audience outdoors, and I just remember playing one of my songs that was kind of the radio hit. We started playing, the guitar started playing the riff, and the audience started clapping because they knew the song. And it was really one of those, and in fact, my sax player, Greg, walked up to me at that moment. He goes, "Remember this," it's just a really special moment because it was just, it was everything I had dreamt of up to that point, of being able to be on a stage like that, in a certain level of respect and notoriety, and my music, and being able to present it in that kind of setting. So that always stands out as a really big memory for me. Like I said, if I really thought through it, maybe there were others that I might love more. Actually, one of my all-time favorite gigs was a gig where nobody showed up in a little club in a college town not too far from here. If there were two people there, I don't even remember them, but we just went ahead and played anyways. And it was one of the most musical nights of my life. Like, I just remember all of us just enjoying making music that night. So, and as far as what I'd like to do, I would, like most musicians, I'd love to do an album that I got to use a lot of strings on, and my what I gravitate towards the most musically is probably pretty Latin, Brazilian, Spanish type of melodies on the softer side, kind of like the Art Farmer records we were talking about, some of those Mangione records. I just love pretty music. I love music that moves me emotionally, and I would I'd be thrilled to just be able to put out music like that, and to do it at a level, I can record stuff here at home, and I do all the time, but to be able to really do it, have the full budget to do it the way I want it, and all of that, that would be that'd be a thrill for me. I actually, before COVID, I was in talks to go do a night with the Indianapolis Symphony. And hopefully that'll still happen. But we were just starting to talk about arrangements. I thought, oh my gosh, I get to do a night with a full ensemble like that. So hopefully someday. But that's in there.
Would that be all your originals then?
I don't know. No, probably not. I think to be honest, I don't think my originals have enough of a cachet with an audience that doesn't know me. So I'd like to do some of my originals, but I think I'm perfectly happy to do songs people love hearing too. There's always the Louis Armstrong stuff. There's the cocktail jazz stuff that people know, that always happy to play that music as well.
Yeah, there's nothing like strings and playing with an orchestra. Years ago, touring with Ray Charles, we had a period of time where we played with the Atlanta. We did like 3 shows with the Atlanta Symphony, and that was cool because they had the whole big band within the confines of the whole symphony, and it was super fun. And then, like, you did my little project with strings, which turned out to be a huge project for me. But there's nothing like it, and that was the whole purpose for me. It really wasn't about selling anything. I mean, my background is a lot like yours. We have Latin backgrounds, and we have certain kinds of music that we've gravitated to, and you grow up with this stuff and you want to create something around those sounds you hear in your head. So that's what this whole album was. And in fact, all went out to, I flew everybody out to Buenos Aires, Argentina. We used a lot of the symphony musicians over there. We spent a lot of time, about probably 6 months ahead of time, just putting the arrangements together, et cetera. And it's very rewarding, and it has sold all over the world, which is cool. Definitely haven't retired and gotten rich off it, but it was fun. And it's nice to have, just as I guess as a vanity piece, I'll call it.
And that's the tough part, is most albums now, that's what they are. They're just vanity. It's things we do because we have to, like, we have to put stuff out there in the world, but it's really hard to make a living doing, I used to make money putting out records, and now it's, if I want to do a record, I think, okay, how much money can I lose? That's the difference, unfortunately. So
I remember a buddy of mine, and this is way back, obviously Ray Brown was still alive, and he was in Vancouver and hanging with a bass player friend of mine, who took him out to play some golf. And he said, "So Ray, what's your next album going to be?" This is when Ray was putting out those, some of my favorite players are tenor sax players, or
Right.
some of my favorite people are female vocal, whatever they were, And Ray said, "You know what? I make more money spending $100 around playing golf than I would if I put an album out." And this is Ray Brown.
Yeah, it's a sad state of the industry.
Yeah, but I'm a firm believer that we are supposed to try to leave a legacy on this earth. And I don't know who will listen to my music when I'm gone, but hopefully someday my kids will pop it on and remember me. Just so I'm gonna keep doing it. And
Well, we were chatting the other day just about these interviews that we're doing, and about this particular Facebook group here. And there's, there's a historic element to everything we're doing, and particularly the interviews, with folks. We've had some, some other awfully, well-known, trumpeters, as on here. So there's something kind of cool about that I hadn't thought of when we first started the site, but now I kind of look back and go, wow, this is pretty cool. And we've learned a lot too. So that's the upside of it.
Yeah, it's been really great. The page is informative and fun and interesting and relevant to all of us. It's great. I've loved it.
So I know we're just about out of time here, and I'll see if you want to tell this story, because I recall it to a degree. Okay. But Tony has a great story about Freddie Hubbard, and this one time when you actually subbed for him, and maybe you could give a little background on that, because it's really, I find it fascinating.
My favorite way to title that story is the time Freddie Hubbard called me for a trumpet lesson. Which should make you laugh as hard as you're laughing in. So yeah, I got asked to do an album, just to be part of a horn section on an album, and Freddie was going to be a soloist on it. And I went to the session. I didn't know he was going to be there that day. I just knew he was going to be part of this album. And I went there that day, and the horn section itself was great. It was Wilton Felder on saxophone, and just great players all around. And Freddie walked in, and I instantly shrunk into myself. I felt my rib cage just sink in, and I hadn't warmed up or anything. And I honestly thought, I can't even warm up in front of this guy. Like I'm that nervous. And, but I had to, so I went off in the corner, and I'm just doing my low tones, and I had a certain warm up I was doing at the time. And so that's all I could do, was just try to do that. And, Freddie, on the other hand, took out his horn and first thing out of the chute was just a big, high, loud thing. But within a few moments, he couldn't play anymore. And this, as it turns out, was when he was having really major issues with his lip, and from which we all know he never recovered from. And he basically lost his lip pretty early on. During a little break, I did get to talk to him, meet, and we hung out. And one of the things he said was, he hadn't really had to warm up in years. Like, he just always was on his horn. And he said, I got to learn some warm ups like what you were doing over there. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I'm happy to show you anytime, The day went on. He did his solo. Of course, they're just flashes of brilliance, but a lot of problems with his lip. And he got to the end of the song, and they wanted him to do a little lick at the end of the tune, and he couldn't play it. Like, nothing was coming out, and it was sad and frustrating to watch that, because he's obviously one of my heroes. And so after he left, the producer asked if I just go play a little thing at the end. So I did. So technically, I was filling in for Freddie Hubbard for that little lick at the end. And then a couple weeks later, my wife answered the phone, and then she called me and said, "Hey, Tony, it's somebody named Freddie for you." I'm like obviously, like you do, you think it's a joke. But I picked up the phone. It was Freddie, and he said, and had I known, I would have figured out a way to record it. But he just said, "Hey, Tony, I want you to come up and give me a trumpet lesson." And hearing those words from him, of course, were ridiculous. And I told him, "Look, I can't teach you anything, but I'll show you my warm-ups and you'll give me a trumpet lesson. How's that?" So I went and spent the day with him at his house, and we talked a lot, and he was a sweetheart to me. I mean, there's a lot of stories about him being kind of a rough guy, but he was very sweet. And we just spent the day together and playing, and he showed me some great stuff I still think about today. And I showed him my little warm up, and over the next few months, he would just call occasionally and just talk. It was almost like I would sometimes wonder if he even knew who he was calling, because he would just be telling stories and talking. But then he'd say my name. I'm like, yeah, he knows who he's talking to. So, but then little by little that relationship faded, and he went to New York for a while, and I did attend his funeral. But one of the great memories for me, being a trumpet player and just spending the day with him. And I'm getting to do a lot of that right now with Arturo Sandoval, who is I've been doing some engineering for him and some writing, and we're going to be producing some stuff together coming up. But just to spend time with somebody at that level, who is not only at that level, but does everything in their power to not intimidate you. Like, Freddie was so gracious to me as a player who, there's no way he could have heard me play and thought, this guy's on my level. But he was just so sweet and gracious. And, same with Arturo. He's just nothing but sweet and complimentary and supportive of me as a player. And so those are really great things and great life lessons for us too, just to be thinking about how we deal with younger players, or, people who aren't quite where we're at yet. And, and I know there's a lot of guys. Bobby, I know, is somebody like that. I've only had a few instances with Bobby, and he's been Bobby Shue, and he's always been very gracious that way.
Yeah, he's been the best, absolutely. I've known him since I was probably 17 years old, and he's basically been my mentor throughout my life. I've had a lot of other great teachers, but he's always been there, not only just to give lessons and help you with your playing, but just the whole, the whole moral support kind of thing, and just to let you know that you're not going through anything new, man. You're not special. I like some of that stuff that he tells me, and it's fun. We just interviewed him. We have a little 2-part series. Yeah. And so, he gets better and better, and his teaching gets better and better and more refined. And hopefully that's what we want to do. And I always tell him, you're just such an inspiration and a great model for all of us.
Yeah. He's also one of my favorite, obviously great trumpet player, but one of my favorite flugelhorn players by far.
Oh yeah.
I have never gotten tired of listening to that album, Breakfast Wine. Like, I just love that record and his playing on it. And
right.
quick little story about him. I was somebody had handed me a plastic mouthpiece, and I played on it one night. I'm like, oh, this is really comfortable. I like this. And I started playing on it more. And then I ended up like using that as my main mouthpiece for a little while. And then I stopped because I was tired of other trumpet players making fun of me. And I had a conversation with Bobby, and he said, we got on the subject of mouthpiece, and he said, yeah, I've been using this plastic mouthpiece. I'm like, wait, you're allowed to do that? So
Yeah.
right back onto the plastic mouthpiece for a while. So I was on that for a little while.
Yeah, cool. He sounds great on all of them, man. And if it's comfortable, that's I guess that's the right, and you sound good, that's the right mouthpiece for you.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, thanks so much for being part of this today, man. It's been a joy talking to you and learning a little bit more about you, and getting you out in front of a lot of other people that should know about you. I think the whole world should know about you. And thank you, Paul, here too, for helping out and being part of this thing. Been a great interview, and we'll look forward to seeing you real soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, both of you guys. And thanks for what you're doing here too. It's great.
Thank you.
Tony.
Appreciate it.